Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world without sugar. No sweet coffee in the morning, no chocolate, no cakes or desserts. For most of human history, that was normal. Sugar was once so rare that it was considered a luxury medicine rather than food. Kings owned it, doctors prescribed it, and most people in the world had never tasted it. But within just a few centuries, sugar transformed from a rare spice into one of the most powerful forces in global history. It helped build empires, it fueled colonization, and it drove one of the largest systems of human exploitation the world has ever seen. This is the story of how a simple crystal changed the fate of millions. The story begins more than 1,000 years ago in Asia. Sugarcane originally grew in Southeast Asia and India, where people discovered how to extract sweet crystals from the plant. From there, knowledge of sugar spread slowly across Persia and the Arab world. Arab traders and farmers became masters of sugar cultivation. They developed irrigation systems and large plantations, turning sugar into a valuable trade commodity. But Europe remained largely unfamiliar with it. That began to change during the Crusades. When European crusaders traveled to the Middle East, they encountered a strange and precious substance, crystallized sugar. They called it sweet salt. To European nobles, sugar was exotic, mysterious, and incredibly valuable. Soon, merchants began importing small quantities back to Europe, where it was sold at extremely high prices. But demand grew quickly, and Europeans began searching for places where sugar could be produced on a much larger scale. One of the first places they tried was the Canary Islands. In the 1400s, Spanish colonists arrived on the islands and began establishing sugar plantations. To work these plantations, they enslaved the indigenous Guanche people. Many died from disease, violence, and forced labor. But the plantations proved extremely profitable. Sugar production required enormous amounts of labor. Harvesting sugarcane was physically brutal, and processing it required constant work. The system that developed on the Canary Islands would later be exported across the Atlantic. And that is where Christopher Columbus enters the story. In 1493, during his second voyage to the Americas, Columbus brought sugarcane plants with him to the Caribbean. The climate was perfect, the soil was fertile, and European empires quickly realized the enormous economic potential. Sugar plantations spread rapidly across the Caribbean and South America. But there was one problem. Plantations needed massive labor forces. At first, colonists forced indigenous populations to work the fields. But disease and brutal conditions wiped out millions of native people. So European colonists turned to another source of labor, Africa. This decision would shape centuries of global history. Beginning in the 1500s, European traders began transporting millions of Africans across the Atlantic Ocean. This became known as the transatlantic slave trade. Captured men, women, and children were forced onto ships and transported under horrific conditions. The journey, known as the Middle Passage, was one of the most brutal experiences imaginable. People were packed tightly below deck, often chained together. There was little food, little water, and almost no sanitation. Many died before ever reaching land. Those who survived were sold at slave markets across the Americas. Their labor powered the sugar economy. On plantations, enslaved workers faced relentless conditions. Sugarcane had to be cut quickly before it spoiled. Workers spent long hours under intense heat, cutting heavy stalks with sharp tools. In sugar mills, the cane was crushed and boiled in enormous furnaces. The work was extremely dangerous. Burns, injuries, and exhaustion were common. Life expectancy on many plantations was shockingly short, but the profits were enormous. Sugar became one of the most valuable commodities in the world. European markets could not get enough of it. Entire economies began to depend on sugar production. Perhaps the most dramatic example was the French colony of Saint-Domingue, located on the island of Hispaniola. Today, we know this place as Haiti. In the late 1700s, Saint-Domingue was the richest colony in the world. Its plantations produced huge quantities of sugar and coffee for European markets. But this wealth came at an enormous human cost. Hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans worked under brutal conditions. Eventually, resistance began to grow. In 1791, enslaved people in Saint-Domingue launched one of the most significant uprisings in history. The Haitian Revolution had begun. Led by figures like Toussaint Louverture, enslaved fighters defeated French, Spanish, and British forces.
In 1804, Haiti declared independence. It became the first independent black republic in the modern world, and the only nation born from a successful slave revolt. The revolution shocked the global system built on plantation slavery. Plantation owners across the Americas feared similar uprisings. At the same time, new alternatives to cane sugar began appearing. One of the most important was sugar made from sugar beets. European scientists discovered that beets could also produce sugar. During the Napoleonic Wars, this discovery became extremely important because naval blockades limited access to Caribbean sugar. Beet sugar allowed Europe to reduce dependence on colonial plantations. Meanwhile, the global sugar industry continued expanding. In places like Cuba and Brazil, massive plantations continued producing sugar for international markets. In the United States, sugar also became a major agricultural product, especially in Louisiana. Sugar-shaped trade routes, migration, and international politics. Even in the 20th century, sugar remained deeply connected to global events. In Cuba, the economy depended heavily on sugar exports. This dependence played a role in the political tensions that eventually led to the Cuban Revolution. When Fidel Castro and revolutionary leaders like Che Guevara took power in 1959, they promised to reform the agricultural system. Sugar plantations became symbols of both national wealth and political struggle. Today, sugar is everywhere. It is cheap, accessible, and consumed by billions of people every day. But behind that everyday sweetness lies a history of exploration, empire, exploitation, and revolution. Few everyday products have shaped the modern world so dramatically. Sugar changed global trade. It influenced the rise and fall of empires, and it played a central role in the struggle for human freedom. The next time you stir sugar into your coffee, remember that this small crystal carries centuries of history, a story of power, suffering, resistance, and transformation.